Peace and blessings, family. This is your brother asarimhotep with the Martin Delaney Center for Egyptology. Today is February the 23rd, Wednesday, and I am feeling good, and I hope that you're feeling good. And this is the Mbongi, and today's topic is or I should say, it's a question, in essence, what's at the heart of Voodoo? An overlooked aspect of African kimoyo or spirituality. We're going to get a little deep tonight, but I'm going to try to keep it simple so that everyone can follow. All that and more when we return in just a moment. Welcome, welcome, welcome. And hopefully my thing will, there we go. Oh, duh. Should have just, here we go. Welcome, 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 everyone. I am your host again, Brother asarimhotep. And this is the Mbongi, a very special Mbongi. And, I don't want to take too much of your time tonight. So I'm just, going to dive directly, into it. But before I do that, of course, I'd like to welcome all of you who are joining the conversation live. And then, of course, those of you who are catching the archives. And so we have with us, who has made herself known, Sister Tamika. Thank you for joining the conversation. And we have Tut Unk Amin. I don't know if that should be Tut Unk Amin, but he says Tut Unk Amin. And we're glad to have you here. We have Teti Ursama Rasaneferu in the building. And we got Sunjata Ata Kakra and Zombie in the place to be. And we have Sis the Safa in the place to be. And so, normally I don't do shows this late in the middle of the week, but I have some time on my hands. So decided that, we're gonna have a show tonight. And it's really inspired by something that I saw in a recent film. And we'll get to the film and I'll show that a little later. And so, matter of fact, I think I'm gonna turn this down here. I'm just experiment with the music. It comes with music now that you can have playing low in the background. So in the beginning, I'll reserve that for when I'm doing some kind of closing commentary or something like that. We'll experiment, in the near future. But matter of fact, let me had this synced up already. Yes. In Prime Video, so let's do that. And if you have not already, I'm gonna need each and every one of you to that is right. I'm gonna need y'all to hit the like button. And if you are new to the channel, please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so that you know when we're having these types of conversations. And I hope that everyone is staying safe and keeping warm. I'm here in Texas. I'll be here for another month. And then I am scheduled to be back on the East Coast. So West Philly will be in the building. And so, I'm gonna miss this place, but it's starting to feel like Philly right now. Yesterday it was warm. I was in shorts, and I had my ankles showing. Then I woke up this morning in some shorts and walked outside and saw all the ashiness on my leg and wondering what was going on, and then felt the temperature, and then boom, we was down to what, 30 degrees today, 30 and 33 degrees. So, uh, the weather is really schizophrenic out here in Texas. And so, but hold on one sec. Want to acknowledge MF Taharka Soul in the building and brother Sean P in the building. Thank you for joining. And we're going to get into it. So again, the topic of the program is what's at the heart of voodoo, an overlooked aspect of African kimoyo or spirituality. And so, in this program, we like to discuss all aspects of African culture and history, from the present day to the ancient of days. And I have a special knack for the spiritual and philosophical traditions of Africa because I love um, deep critical thinking and the like. And part of that process is discovering what concepts that our African ancestors uh, creatively, expressed either in terms of thought, in terms of culture, philosophy, and of course in art. And so, doing this deep research for, over 20 years now, you come across these patterns and these common ideals that spread all the way, in from North Africa to South Africa. And it's just amazing, these kinds of interconnections. And but more so because I'm an Africologist, and that means I study African history, culture, and phenomena from an African perspective, an African centered perspective. you know we it requires us to really get deep into the mind of the African people themselves, and so that we can get an accurate understanding of the concepts in which they express, either in the oral tradition or in writing. And and so, there's an idea or something that I noticed in the past, you know is late as like 13 or 14 years ago, when I was studying a number of African spiritual traditions. And we're going to get into something that's common, and what that culminated into today. But I was reminded of it again in this particular film that I saw, and it came out in 2018, but I'm just now seeing it because I'm always late, because I'm always studying and doing stuff, so I don't have time to really watch movies and things when they come out. And if it's a series of films or like a television running series, you can just forget it. I have yet to see any episode of the Game of Thrones. I ain't seen Power. I ain't seen none of that. I just don't have the time. But as a result of me not having time, y'all are blessed, with my research. And of course, I like to share the source material that that I come across, so that you can, read it yourself, internalize it, and find, creative ways to bring it into your home. And I don't know if Brother Chavez is watching. But if he is, um, his book came in today, and for some odd reason, I cannot find it. Oh, here we go. So we got Brother Chavez. He's a faithful watcher of the program. He may not even be on the program today, but just wanted to let him know that his book came in titled "Religious Beliefs Revisited: The Tep Haseb Editions" by Chavez Tep Haseb Ahab McCrae. Good brother from H Town and part of the Kofi Pasta research team. So that's who created this text. So I'll be reviewing that in the near future, and uh, we'll, probably have him on the show so he can talk about his text. So big up to Brother Chavez. And I got another book that came in the mail too, and that is Logic, Language, and Meaning, Volume 1, Introduction to Logic. And so I am looking at some material because I'm creating a course on the linkage between logic, mathematics, and linguistics. And so, you know, reviewing some text that I might have the students to review. Anyway, so I've done and said all that I need to say from there. So what I'm going to do is share my screen, and I'm going to go all the way to the beginning. And I don't even know if I actually finished my presentation, but whatever is there, we're going to roll with it because that's just how we do, you know. And so let's do that. So bong. And I think that I'm going to go full screen the whole time. So let's do this. So what's at the heart of Voodoon? So I got to check my phone and make sure that it comes up and shows up on the screen. And yes, it does. So here we go. So, today's focus, we're going to deal with, defining what is Voodoo, general principles of Voodoo. I'm going to show a video clip, and then we're going to have some supplementary material or conversation surrounding the particular topic today. But, a lot of people, when they hear about Voodoo and or voodoo, they have a picture in their mind of some kind of evil underlying, how should I say, kind of, pagan so-called worship and sticking needles and dolls and, people twitching their arms and, all kinds of foolishness that is, of course, the result of, Western miseducation when it comes to African people and African spiritual traditions. And so while this will not be a full out uh, discussion about voodoo itself specifically, um, we're just going to deal with this one major aspect of voodoo. And hopefully, y'all will be, if you are interested in learning more, you can look at some of the materials and explore it on your own. But of course, when we have these conversations, we have to first start off, with what is voodoo. And so this is just a simple Wikipedia entry, and it states that voodoo, meaning spirit in the Fon, Goon, and Ewe languages, pronounced voodoo with a nasal high tone oo, also spelled Vodun, Vodun, Vodau, Voodoo, Voodau, Voodoo, etc., is a religion practiced by the Aja, Ewe, and Fon peoples of Benin, Togo, Ghana, and Nigeria. It is distinct from the various traditional African religions in the interiors of these countries and is the main source of religions with similar names found among the African diaspora in the Americas, such as Haitian Voodoo, Louisiana Voodoo, Cuba Voodoo, Dominican Voodoo, and Brazilian Voodoo. And to an extent, we can add hoodoo here in the United States. And so it continues. Voodoo cosmology centers around the Voodoo spirits and other elements of divine essence that govern the earth. And I have this bolded for a reason, and we're going to see why in just a little bit. A hierarchy that range in power from major deities governing the forces of nature and human society to spirits of the individual streams, trees, and rocks, as well as dozens of ethnic voodoo defenders of certain clans, tribes, or nations. And so you can see some of the uh, voodoo spiritual artwork and totems and spirits or spirit holders or shrines on the on the right hand side there. And so in there's a text that talks about basically the speech of the fawn, language and culture of Benin, and that's written in French by Dominique Fadaro, if I'm saying that correctly. And so, some of this is translation and summary of what's in the text there. But it first starts off talking about with the religion of the Fong or Fongbe, if y'all don't that's kind of the full expression of the name. And what they say is that the term religion, in the sense of pious beliefs and practices, corresponds to the Fon expressions nu sinsen or sinsen, and which breaks down into nu, which is a thing, and then said, to adore, and then when it's partially reduplicated or reduplicated, sinsen, adoration. So it's the adoration of a thing. And there's this other expression, nu di di, or di, um, which has to deal with to believe. And then when it's reduplicated, it becomes a noun and it becomes belief. And so when you're talking about the religion, they have these are the words that roughly translate to religion in English, right? And so uh, the Fon believe in the existence of course, a supreme being, which is Mawu, and sometimes you'll see it written as Mawu Lisa. And but Lisa is the sky sun deity. Mawu is the earth. Of its Voodoon intermediaries. So remember that Voodoon is simply a word for spirit. And so these are the intermediary spirits between Mawu and you know the human living community. So that's why that definition at the beginning talk about the Voodoo being basically governors of various phenomena and aspects of the earth, while that is very important to note. So um included in the religion of the Fongbe is this notion of the beyond, right? And the beyond, they 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 note by different names. So you have long or long, and then you have Lantome and Sekwe, and that Kwe in the word Sekwe is house of the spirit, and the word Se is the word for soul or spirit. And matter of fact, that is a doublet in the language for the word Orisha. So it's Orisha. In some languages they say Orishe, and in some they'll say Orisha. And this is one of those words, say Orishe. So the house of Orisha, in terms of the beyond, fully integrated into the world of the living. They also believe in the powers of evil, and especially in spells, bo, bo, and witchcraft, aze. And note that in the Yoruba language, the mothers of witchcraft or the aje, right? And so the question then becomes, okay, well, what is voodoo really? And this is the film that I was talking about. And so the title of the film that came out in 2018 is a documentary film. It's called In Search of Voodoo, Roots to Heaven. And so it was produced and directed by the actor Jamon Hounsou. And uh, y'all may be familiar with him in films such as uh, one of the more recent ones is his role in the uh, what's the name of those films? Because this was a prequel to the crap. How did I lose the name of that film so fast? Based that it's supposed to be like a spy film. Um, it's like the gentleman, not the gentleman. What's the dang film? But of course, you know him from Amistad. Some of y'all back in the day may have seen him in the Janet Jackson uh, music video because back in the day he used to model. And but he is from Benin, and I forgot what particular group, ethnic group he belongs to, but is one of them, the Airway Fawn or something like that. So somebody can look that up in the chat and double check for me. And so what I so the film itself is talking about, of course, voodoo and the misunderstanding of voodoo and what are the major components and things. And so this is why I'm not going to go through all of that here because I want y'all to check out the film. So if you have, for example, Amazon Prime, uh, it is a free video to watch for those who have Amazon Prime. So I would, if you have not seen it, I would, highly recommend that you go see the film. But if you don't have Amazon Prime, I believe it is also on YouTube as part of one of the paying videos, like one of the paying films. So again, the title of the film is In Search of Voodoo, Roots to Heaven. And so what I'm going to do is just pause for a second this, and then I'm going to share my screen. Hold on. I'm going to go to a part. I think it's about 48 minutes, and hopefully y'all will be able to hear, what is being said. But when people talk about voodoo, right? They have this idea. It's exactly what I said, earlier. And I see Zane Montango said Blood Diamond. Um, that was another good film. And then of course we mentioned Amistad already. And hold on. Okay, there we go. And but so when people think about voodoo, they think about the dolls and the pins and all of this other kind of stuff, and they think they have an idea of what the tradition is. And what I want to do before I play this clip from the film is to uh that's what it was. Well, I'm gonna mention this first. So yes, he did play the voice of Black Panther in the animated series. And I thought about him or either Denzel Washington's son, but I think he would be like the most perfect replacement for Black Panther in the second film. And I don't know what's going on, why they ain't thinking about this, if there's a schedule, but if we could put a petition to have this brother play Black Panther, I it would be great. But anyway, but the film that I was talking about was The Kingsman, and so it was the prequel to the Kingsman that he was in. I knew it was something man. But yeah, it's Kingsman 3, exactly. So, but anyway, so back to what I was saying. People have this idea of what voodoo is, or what African spirituality is, or what what a spirit is. And so you will often hear me on this channel define spirits or the gods or the Netarus in various different ways. And I go through my linguistic processes. Uh, but here's an aspect of this that is rarely talked about. And people don't really understand what African spirituality is at its core, and what's the underlying mission for the relationship with the deity. And that's what we're going to get into now. And so Chautauqua, I don't even know how to pronounce your name, and I know I'm going to missay it. So hopefully you can spell it out, or I can hear you say it one day. So Chautauqua Ellison says Cotonou, Benin, and that he is of the Fong Bay people. And so thank you very much, sister, for updating me on that information. And so, but back to what I was saying. When we talk about spirits, when we talk about spirituality and the underlying mission of what we call Kimoyo or African spirituality, what this lady is about to say in this film at this part of it's like 48 minutes, 40 seconds, it begins the conversation. So hopefully, y'all can hear it. And so I'll just reshare my screen and then share that Chrome tab with, there we go. So hopefully y'all can see it. Is the volume up? The volume is up. So y'all let me know if y'all can hear it clearly once it starts playing. All right. So
Regardez-moi. 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 While Pastor Bonito now makes it his business to use the power and glory of Jesus to heal the infirm, Voodoo is using plans.
Voodoo. Ama, Voodoo. Ama, Voodoo. Do chrétien là, ils ont dit que c'est moi ama. Mon ama, oui, nous d'agbéo. Ama, non, romain, elle est Voodoo. C'est pas Voodoo. Ils ont dit vilain à goncher. Mon cambio, n'aime na bloc mon violon, n'aime na bloc mon violon. Elle est Voodoo de wea. Ama, elle est Voodoo de ne. Ama, Voodoo. Ama, Voodoo.
Iyobo si donu ha mi ro fi a ama mi tan iyobo le su ti donu ha mi ro fi pere a e poro mo di me bi o vodu we lo mi ro fi chrétien lo fi inde ka ro fi a mu iyobo le wa te me bi blessing we le so wa bo mi a lo mi mo ro fi wa ro chrétien di ami sale di o kete le di eni o mi mo pon a yen o pere nu ye di yen mo pon a ama wa yen mo bo mo fa bo mo fodu ku ye we e wo la mi ga kaka je gbeti.
So I hope that y'all caught what was being discussed here, right? So, and I know that it was, you were hearing them speaking in, I assume it's the Fawn language. And what they said is that Voodoon is plants. And that people have a misconception about what Voodoon is. Again, they think it's about simply sacrifices and dances and rituals and the like. But Voodoon is plants. And so we're going to get into that a little bit more. So I'm gonna stop sharing that screen, and then I'm gonna go back to the other screen that I was sharing earlier. So I'll hide that, and then we'll go back. And so in the film, in that short clip, and hopefully y'all could see the closed captioning at the bottom, they were talking about the relationship to plants and how plants is the essence of voodoo. And even in the Yoruba religion, when we talk about orishas, ultimately orishas have to deal with plants. And so in this article, Ewe Orisha, a treatise on the role of plants in Yoruba religion. That word Ewe is the word for plants in the Yoruba language, right? And so it goes on to say in the article, No es santos sin Ewe. There is no Orisha, therefore there's no god or spirit without plants. Trees and plants are endowed with a soul, intelligence, and will, as is all that is born, grows and lives under the sun. Wasn't Jesus born in the mount on a heap of herbs? And in order to go to heaven to become God, didn't he die in the Mount Calvary? Always walking and putting himself in the mountain. He was a Yabero. Each plant has a virtue of an Orisha, a supernatural force. The medicines are living in the mount. And so this is why, you find the quote unquote priest always in the center of the bush or the forest or in the mountains, because this is where the plants are. And so they're looking for the gods. They're looking for the Vodun. They're looking for the Orisha. They're looking for the nature, the spirit behind the plant, not only for food, but primarily for medicine. And so when people start talking about African spirituality, you have to understand that a large component of African spirituality is the study of medicine, the study of plants. So when you're going through these traditions and you see, them reverencing certain deities, understand that they're connected to plants, and that it is the plants that are the vehicle for the emergence of these deities, right? And so, what is the etymology of Vundue? And so, the word Vundun, which designates a sacred and mysterious reality of which there is an infinity, can be denoted as follows. It is broken down into two words, von, which means to be away or apart or different. And then there's the word dun or don, which means over there in the distance or very far, right? And thus, I equate the fawn dun or dun over there in the distance very far with Abibio Idion, earth and soil, with Yoruba Odun, the land, with Arabic Dunia, earth, this world, the lower. Adan, base in Hebrew, be under, below, um, be inferior. I don't know why it's on there twice like that. Um, and so the Egyptian word denit, throne, comes from this notion of a base or pillar. And you should, linguistically, you should know that words for the earth itself double as words for below or base. And those also become the word for to sit. and then the nominal form to throne, right? And so we see these different variations in the forms that we see here on the screen. And so I look at the Vodun in the same way that the Yoruba look at the Irun Mole. And so in discussion of the Yoruba deity Sopona, which we have discussed before on this channel and in several of my texts, showing that the Yoruba deity Sopona or Sopona is a borrowing from ancient Egypt for the goddess Sekhmet. And so when it came to Nigeria, it became the deity of disease. And among the Ewe and Fawn and them, she is known as Sakpata, right? And so, but again, when in Nigeria, she is known or associated with smallpox and diseases in general. And so the word Irunmale, Dr. Modupe Oduyoye, who you see here on the left-hand side, in an article states, it is in Yoruba and Arun, disease. Yoruba Arun shares the same root as Yoruba Irun, sacred being, in Irun Male, sacred beings in the earth. You should know that word Ale is the word for earth, or like and it's the same root that gives us Ile, meaning house, right? But the root is a verb le, meaning to go down, to go below. And right, so when it's nominalized, it becomes the word for a house or the earth itself. And so the room is a reflex of the Afro-Asiatic root harem, from which the Arabic derived the verb haruma, to be sacred. From the same root is derived the Hebrew noun herem, total destruction, the type that is required in a holy war. See Yoruba room, to destroy totally. Arun destroys as effectively as herem. And so he's saying that Irumale are the sacred beings of the earth. Those are the spirits that are found on the ground, in the soil, in the plants, in the waters, and the like. And this is conceptually the same as the Voodoo, right? And so we go back to that the text that we mentioned earlier, and it says, "We obtain Voodoon or Vodun, which is remote, very far from us, and which escapes us." In other words, any manifestation of a force, any monstrosity, any phenomena that goes beyond the imagination or human intelligence is Vodun and calls for worship, but is the spirit, that is venerated and not the envelope, the tree, the animal, the tumulus, which is a mound or a hill or a burial mound, which hides it from our eyes. So what they're saying is that it is whatever force that is beyond our normal experience, and that is housed or enveloped in some kind of phenomena or matter, so to speak, right? So whatever that force is that governs the tree, that makes the tree a tree, that governs the water, that governs the soil, that governs a particular herb or the wind or whatnot, all of that is Voodoo. So you have what you're able to see, and then you have an aspect of it that is beyond our experience, that you're not able to see. That aspect, that animating force that you're not able to see, that's Voodoo. And as we saw earlier, it said Voodoo is the heart of Voodoo is plants, medicine. That's our access to the spirit world, is through the plants, right? And so if you don't know about the fawn and whatnot. They again, they live, you know, on the borders of Togo and Benin. But this is going to lead us to a related group of people called the Ga, or the Ga Dangbe, right? And these folks live over here in Ghana, in the southern part of Ghana. So when you see this kind of dark brown area here, this is primarily where they are concentrated and focused. And so you can see some Ga folks here, you know, and some sisters or whatnot, and some young men in the back at some kind of ceremony, right? And so, if you're familiar with this channel or familiar with my work, this what you read here about Voodoon, that uh, you know, that talks about any manifestation of a force, any monstrosity, any phenomena that goes beyond the imagination or human intelligence is Voodoon or Vodun, and calls for worship, right? And so this sounds very familiar, or it should sound very familiar to those of you who follow my work and who follow this channel, because we've mentioned this before using another term called won, or won, right? Among the God people. And this won or won has cognates in ancient Egyptian. It is, you know, saying a word for essence, the spirit, is a title for Osiris. You find it in the Yoruba language as Iwin, ancestors, ghost spirits, or Awo, or Awon, spirit. And among the Ingas, another group in Nigeria, Won, ancestors, the living dead, the shades. And the Bachama, Won, or Won, the demigod in charge of the dead, the demigod in charge of the kingdom of death. This is their version of Osiris in Bachama, among the Bachama in Nigeria, right? And so in the text, religion and medicine and the God people, you know, if you ever hear me talking about the word spirit, you know, this is my go-to definition for what a spirit is in Africa, and what a God is and what a spirit is. And so it says a won, and we're going to substitute it with the word Vodun. By God definition, is anything that can work but not be seen, and includes the smaller beings of specialized and limited activity associated with what? Medicines and magic. And what is medicines? We're not talking about, you know, back in the day, we didn't go to Eckerd's or CVS and get a prescription that was in a bottle. You went to the herbalist, you went to the babalawo, and you got plants, right? And so the won are the spirit in representing anything that can work but not be seen. This whole notion of not being readily seen is very important. Excuse me, I had to take a drink. And associated with medicines, aka plants, and magic, right? And I in other conversations, you've seen me connect the word Iwin, um, you know, ancestors, Awon spirit, etc. Remember that Iwin is an epithet for Osiris. And so here's one of the fuller representations is Win Nefer, which we associate linguistically with the Yoruba concept of Iwa Pele, or Iwa Pele, which means good or gentle character. And when Iwa is the word for character, but the word for character is the word also for essence or the spirit. When you say the spirit of a thing, you're saying the essential part of it, the fundamental aspect of anything. So when you're talking about the character the spirit or whatnot, they're all the same concept. They all utilize the same words in African spirituality. And so when we talk about the Vo, I wonder if in that definition that was given in that one text, if the Vo was in fact a folk etymology. I'm still investigating, but my hunch is that the Vo in Vodun is really a dialectical variation of this word won, that we find among the Ga, just a little bit to the west of them, and that it more so coincides with that, the definition that we got for Irumale in talking about the sacred beings of the earth. And if my hypothesis, pans out, I will make sure to update each and every one of y'all with the details. But this is my hunch. And so we'll have to revisit that someday, in the near future. So don't quote me yet. Because I could be wrong. There's steps I have to go through to verify that. But that's my hypothesis for right now. So, but anyway, in the text traditional religion in West Africa, one of the authors, this is an edited text, talks about the Babalawos in Yoruba land. And this is one of the citations that I use to demonstrate the essence of nature in among the Yoruba people, and as well as the concept of the flag with the white cloth at the top of the pole. And so, but what I want to kind of focus on here, besides that, is in essence what the Babalawo actually represents within this process. So when talking about the Babalawos, the author states they were pastors, advisors, and consultants. They hardly ever preached. The closest to their function in the work of the ministers of the church is in pastoral counseling, in one-to-one confidential situations. And yet, from this base of privacy of Awo, and where Awo means mystery, the hidden, their reputation was noised abroad by word of mouth. A worried people traveled to consult them, the Babalawos, that is, over their dwelling, over the Babalawos' dwelling. They hoisted a white cloth on a pole. That's this hieroglyph that you see right here on the bottom left-hand corner. That white cloth is the Babalawos' symbolic way of announcing to everyone who passes by, here you may ask of God. And wherever in Yoruba land or in Igbo land or among the Dahomey, one sees that white cloth fluttering atop a pole, one knows wordlessly, that means without saying, that there dwells a wise man, a medicine man, perhaps also a magician, invariably a man of God. Why are we coming across this pattern of associating medicine with deity? And note that the word nature is a word for deity, spirit. And its cognate in the Yoruba language is Iwin, I won't. And I won't go into the details here because I'm trying not to do a deep linguistic analysis today. So I'm saving y'all from my deep linguistic analyses today, but we're going to keep it moving. So when we talk about these invisible forces, invisible doesn't necessarily mean non-existent. When you go to the church nowadays, when they talk about the supernatural, It is not the same concept as what you find in indigenous Africa. Because again, existence is an infinity. There's no such thing as supernatural. Everything is nature. There's just aspects of nature that you can see, and there are other aspects of nature that you cannot see. But just like, X-rays, just because you can't see them does not mean that they do not have a physical reality. Just that in our everyday experience, we do not see them, the spirit. And so people get spooked out talking about spirits and spirituality because they're thinking it's some otherworldly thing, but it is not. These are physical beings, physical things that are just invisible to the naked eye that cause phenomenon to be and to behave in a certain way. And so on the screen right now, you see a hand with some batteries, or I should say, holding some batteries. And so I'm saying Vodun in modern technology. When you think about spirit, when you're holding a battery, do you think that there are spirits in the battery? Well, hopefully, if you don't, by the end of this conversation, you will look at things differently. So remember, you're just talking about the aspect or because remember, let's go back. So when it says a womb by God definition is anything that can work but not be seen. Remember the definition of what energy is. Energy is anything that can work or that can do work. And all work means in physics is to be able to move at minimum a particle from point A to point B. That's work, right? No matter how big the difference in terms of distance, if there's a point A and it has some distance from point B, or point B has some distance from point A, and uh, there's a force that's acting upon at minimum a particle that can move it from point A to point B, that what we call that process is work. And so a force that can make or something move is what we call a won or a Vodun or an Orisha. And remember that energy is not a substance unto itself. It is a measure, right? It measures the quality of work that some phenomena can do, right? And so we're talking about an agent. A won or voodoo is an invisible agent that can do work. And invisible does not necessarily mean transparent, just that it is not part of our normal everyday experience, right? So when we talk about these batteries, we got to understand exactly what a battery is. And so, of course, y'all know that batteries, provide some form of energy to us, right? In any kind of mechanical device. But very few people understand exactly what a battery is. And so, here's a hefty little, I got this from, some K to 12 website, science website, that has done this for us. So here you see a representation of a battery cell, and it's broken up into three sections. You have at the top on the positive end, which you can tell by the plus sign, that is called a cathode. And then you have in the middle, which is the black bar here, an electrolyte. And then you have at the bottom what is called an anode, right? And it's on the negative charge side. So let's read what it says on the side. Because of the chemicals in the battery, electrons build up in the anode. Electrons repel each other. The anode, being negative, wouldn't mind getting rid of those fidgety electrons. So at the bottom here is just electrons, you know, having a concert running wild, and the battery wants to get rid of them because they're causing all kinds of noise down there in the basement, right? And so it continues on this side. The electrons would like to get to the cathode. That means from the bottom here to the top. However, which is very welcoming. You must say it is a positive place to go. But the electrolyte blocks the electrons from going there. So the whole purpose of of the of this electrolyte layer is to block and to keep the electrons from moving to this side here, the cathode side. So when you talk about the quote unquote energy that is stored in the battery, it has to deal with how many electrons are currently stored in the anode part of the battery, right? So when you attach a copper wire to both ends of the battery, on the negative side and the positive side, on the anode side and the cathode side, the copper wire provides now a pathway for the electrons to go, right? And it is the movement of the electrons that we know as electricity. And because the copper wire is a good conductor of electricity, that means it allows for the electrons to move, and there's an electromagnetic, ring around the the coppers that propel the electrons to move in that direction. And if you put some kind of device like a light bulb, and you have that right there, you can light up a light bulb, right? And so when you expel all of the electrons in the battery, that means all of it is now going to the positive side. So in order to get rid of all the electrons in the anode bottom portion in the basement of the battery, you have to find a good conductor that is connected to the cathode, which draws the the which grounds and draws the electrons to it. So once all of the electrons are emptied from the anode section, that's when you have quote unquote no more energy. There's no more work. There's no more movement of the electron, right? So this is an example of spirits, because electrons are invisible to our everyday experience, to our eyes, but we can utilize them to make something happen and to be useful in our everyday experience in our world. It's not something that is separate from the world. It's not supernatural, because the electrons are a part of nature. They're just, again, they are not visible to the naked eye. We need certain instruments to be able to access the Vodun that reside at the basement of the battery, right? And so, again, with very sophisticated, instruments and equations, that we can program or send into computers that can give us graphical representation like this hydrogen atom. And so this is Schrodinger's equations, as graphed, for certain elements. And so this is for the hydrogen element, right? So you're looking at a representation of a spirit. It is nothing spooky, right? There's nothing spooky here. And so here's our standard elementary particles chart. These are the elements that do work that create the phenomenon that we see. These are the things that are inside, these are the spirits that are inside plants or inside the mountain or whatever. And so we just saw we were met with one of the spirits, the electron. We call him electron. But he's part of a pantheon of deities. So you have, the leptons is part of the lepton group. So you have the electron, the muon, the tau, the electron neutrino, the muon neutrino, the tau neutrino. Every element here has its opposite. So it's masculine and feminine. It's Osiris and it's Aset. You have your quarks, you have your up and down quark, charm, strange, top, bottom. And then you have your gauge bosons, gluon, photon, Z boson, W boson. And then we have the Higgs, and we're looking for its opposite currently. And so the Higgs boson, which is a scalar boson, was relatively recently confirmed, I think, in 2012. But the argument for its existence based upon mathematics was argued 50 something years ago. And luckily the person who the Higgs boson is named, he lived long enough to have his hypothesis confirmed as a result of the Large Hadron Collider in CERN, at CERN. So you're looking at representations. These aren't the actual spirits that you're seeing on the screen. These are just graphical representations of these phenomena. So it's no different than when you were to go and see, for example, a representation like this. If I have a graphical representation of Osiris, this Osiris represents some or a group, a category of phenomena in nature. So this is the graphic representation that was used in ancient Egyptian times to talk about the Voodoon in ancient Egypt. But today we utilize other signs. So, there's a book that I recommend on the left-hand side. It's called Textbook of Plant Chemistry. And so for those of you who just have a deep scientific knowledge, or excuse me, a scientific hunger for the knowledge of science, or a great hunger for the knowledge of science, this is in biology and chemistry, more specifically, then this is one of the books that I recommend. Because this is what our ancestors were involved in. They were involved in the study of Voodoon. Today we call it plant biology, or just biology in general. And what you see here, these chemical compositions, these signs, these are the representations of the Voodoon of these plants. And so this one is focused on the malevolent spirits. the ones that can cause rashes and blisters and all kind of negative and itchy reactions to human skin. So you got to know how to interact and deal with these spirits. It's all about the change of the language and understanding the language and what the stuff means. So people don't get spooked out and thinking that you have to light incense to have spiritual communion and the like. That's not how this works. And so there was a text that I wrote in 2011 for a debate that I was having with a childhood friend of mine who turned minister, a pastor, a Christian pastor, I should say. And the title of the text is Passion of the Christ or Passion of Osiris, the Congo origins of the Jesus myth. Now, my title was very loaded. And, if you try to find this book, I have taken it off the market because I'm revamping it. And, it's going to be a major overhaul. But the fundamental essence of my argument is pretty much going to stay the same. But this was written a long time ago, and so much I have learned since then, and there's so much that I have to correct in this particular text. And there's other aspects, of course, that I'm keeping and building on from this text. But one of the things that I noted in the text is the relationship between Jesus of the Hebrew Bible and Osiris. And you're finding a lot of discussion on the internet where people are saying that there's no connection, between ancient Egypt and the Bible development. That's a bunch of BS. And then if they do admit that there's some, they try to minimalize it. And what I'm arguing here is that, when it comes to Christianity, the major aspects of the story of Jesus Christ was influenced and in many issues borrowed from ancient Egypt. And so there's this connection between Osiris and Jesus in terms of name, in terms of paronymic connections, in terms of fundamental characteristics and the like. And in addition, I argue that both Jesus and Osiris are symbols or avatars for the healing power of plants and life-giving water. And so my argument, again, is that Jesus is essentially an elaborated story about the power of plants, in that he is a personification of a plant. Just like Yahweh is a personification of a storm or a volcano, and anything that carries those particular type of loud, thunderous characteristics are associated with Yahweh in the biblical tradition. And in the same way that Osiris is associated with plants, he's a personification of plants, and the Lord of waters and the spirit of water, the life-giving water, is the same thing that you find with Jesus the Christ of the Bible. But that, again, is a whole nother conversation, so we're not going to get too deep into that tonight. But, here's a representation. You can see the coloration of Osiris. His color is green because he is an Orisha, and an Orisha is a Won, and a Won is a Voodoon, and a Voodoon is a plant. And you can see that Osiris in this judgment scene here, he's sitting on a throne that itself is sitting on a pool of water, and we see plants emerging out of the water, right? And so sometimes you will see Osiris pitch black because he's associated with the fertile soil that comes as a result of the Nile flooding its banks, right? And so, most of us should be familiar with Osiris and his characteristics, or with Cyril Osir, right? So, you'll find some of these aspects that have been adopted by the Christians in association with Jesus the Christ. And so even Aset herself is associated with healing and medicine. And so you even have her name. This is her name at the top here, Aset, or Reset, or Resit, or Isit, right? And then you have the same name for a word for medicine, or in this case, a particular type of medicine. You'll if you read any of the primary texts, you'll have aspects of the text where she is involved in certain predicaments where she is forced to exhibit her healing skills and her knowledge of plants and medicines, and anti-poisonous, venom for snake bites and the like. And maybe one day we'll just go over just one of her stories uh, that displays this. But it's no coincidence that for just like amongst the Orisha in the Ewe, the with Ewe meaning plants, in the Orisha tradition, how the Orishas all are associated with plants. And it's no different in the ancient Egyptian tradition. While many may be associated with larger or other phenomena in nature, all of them are associated with some kind of plant. And so, here's another, term, the Pau Watiu, or the so-called primeval gods. The primeval gods are those chemical compositions that give rise to phenomena. And then, of course, those are the Voodoon that give rise to the medicine, like we see here, this particular medicinal ingredient. And so this word here, primeval, having to deal with beginnings, we see cognates in the Yoruba language as bere, begin, and in Chiluba, beji, first and primary, right? And so these are like, they also double as words for to create, to give birth to initiate. So when we're talking about primeval gods, these are the initiating forces that give rise to the phenomena that we see in the world today. And so again, that same phenomenon, because when we're talking about Inwin and God and Osiris, Win is a word for beings and gods, but Win is also to be, to exist, to live. It's also a word for character, essential essence of being. And so that's what you see here with Iwa, Uwa, and Iwa Pele. So it's the spirit of goodness. Someone who has a good spirit when we talk about Iwa Pele. Someone who has a perfect spirit, someone with good character, right? And so, even among the Lugbara in, the Sudan and in the eastern part of the Congo, the northeastern part of the Congo, they have a cognate for the word nature in their language, but it's called Adro. And in this text, Lugbara religion, ritual authority among an East African people, the author states, I translate Adro and Adroa as God, although the correspondence of meaning is not exact. Adro, the basic form of the term, refers to a personified force outside the control and beyond the understanding of living men who are his creatures. So we're coming back to that same definition again. So let me read that again. The Adro, the basic form of the term, refers to a personified force outside the control and beyond the understanding of living men who are his creatures. Indeed, unlike our term God in English, Adro is used also to refer to a category of objects. So it's not just a one phenomena. It can refer to a theme or category of objects. which are manifestations of divinity and beyond the control and understanding of men. Many apparently miraculous things are called adro. We'll substitute words here. Are called Voodoon, or called Orisha, or called Awon, such as what I have called the guardian spirit of a man, or even matches. The word is sometimes used for testicles and for the power of procreation. So that power of procreation goes back to this notion here of primordial being. It is that which gives birth to something, the ability to do work, right? Adro lives on earth, especially in rivers. He is also found in large trees and thickets, and on high mountains and rocky places. He is in every stream. Adro is common to all Lugbara. And then goes on and on and on. And I won't read the rest. But y'all get the common theme here. And so in this text here called African Worlds, in an article titled The Mende in Sierra Leone, written by Kenneth Little, it's an edited text. In regards to the Mende, he states that these societies, in terms of these secret societies, and more particularly their senior members, are the experts in such matters, and hence the official specialists and practitioners of medicine in Mende society. So when people start talking about priest and priesthood, what you're fundamentally talking about a person who is knowledgeable in the healing arts. And so Modupe Oduyoye, in that text that we mentioned earlier, West African religions, when talking about in the Arabic among the Arabs, he says that Hakayim in Arabic means wise man, and it's also a physician, a doctor. The Semitic word has immediately revealed a tendency in antiquity for the possession of wisdom to be manifested in the ability to heal sickness, and for medical skill to be required as one of the services expected of a man who claims to possess wisdom. So if you are expected to be a wise person in traditional societies, you must have a large knowledge of the healing art. You must have a relationship with the gods, the spirits, the Vundue, the plants. And so here's a picture of a Babalawo, doing prayers for someone's Ori Inu, their quote unquote inner head, right? And so you have these common words in these African and even Semitic languages for a physician or a doctor that is associated with a wise person. And so in Arabic, it is atiba, which is physicians or doctors. In Ethiopic, it's tabib, which is a sage, a tababit, sage. In Fulani, Modibo, Muslim holy man, scribe. In the Igbo, it is Nabia, a divine medicine man, a sage. Or among the Hassa, Mai, Duba, a seer. You will see that all these things are connected, that the physician and doctor is associated with a holy man or being a sage. So being wise, having wisdom, in large part includes knowledge of plants and the healing arts, right? And so variations of this word can be found among the Ohobo as Obo, medicine man, Obo Ebva, the Ifa priest, Obo, medicine man. In Middle Egyptian, we say wa'ab, which means to be pure or be clean, but it's also the word for priest. You also have the word sim, which is a dialectical variation of that very same word. I don't have time to go into the sound laws and to demonstrate it, but y'all know me. I'm ready for all the smoke for anybody who doubts on this. And then you have in the Yoruba language, Adibo, diviner, medicine man, Idabo, Ifa medicine. In the Baluba language, we have Kitobo, priest, right? And so we see the connection here: priest, medicine man, wise man, all connected. And so another cognate for this term in the Egyptian language is seba, and this is a lot of people understand this term to mean a teacher, but it refers to as well a wise person, a sage, but also a physician. And so this is a widespread term for someone who has mastered the healing arts. And that is a result of their ability to heal, they have accumulated a lot of wisdom about life, about people and society. Because of course, we're not just dealing with just medicines, but you're dealing with a holistic way of looking at society and the person in healing. So you also have to be a counselor. You also have to be a sociologist. You also have to be an anthropologist. And so the purpose of this conversation, besides just to mention the relationship between Voodoon, the concept, and plants in medicine, is to encourage more of us to get into the healing arts of the modern era. And so getting into and learning about medicine, about surgery, and the like, about health, is keeping in the tradition of one's ancestors, one's African ancestors, right? And so this the Bia is cognitive with Seba. And what you're looking at here are two Seba, two Dabias, two African Black Dabias, right? And so we also need these Dabias and wise people to be a part of the chemistry industry, to understand chemistry. So now that you understand plants and how to categorize them and what they're used for, you have to get deeper and to know the orishas behind them. You have to know the Voodoon. You have to know them intimately. You have to know those muons and those bosons and electrons and protons and the relationships and which ones bind and which ones can't stand each other. And if you group these together, what's the impact that that has on the physical body or in the environment in general? How long can they stay together? What are some of the forces that will break that relationship up? This is, after physics, it's chemistry, right? And so these are priests. We have this idea that a priest has to be someone in a long robe, smelling like incense and oils and walking around in sandals and funny hats. A priest is a chemist, is a medical doctor, is an herbalist, et cetera, et cetera. So follow in the tradition, get into these healing arts. We need more Black doctors. Encourage your children to take those math courses, to take those chemistry courses, to eat right and be healthy. At minimum, if you don't feel that you know have what it takes, or you feel you're just too late in life to pursue this as a career, you can at least study enough so that you can understand your own health and understand the gods involved in keeping your body healthy, right? We need more people, you know, to own land or to create, you know, community gardens so that you can, you know, you can grow herbs, and we can open up stores like this to help with the healing process in the community. And so here's a, you know, a website that I like to recommend. You know, it's the herbalacademy.com. And so, you know, it talks about a Black herbalist spotlight, Emma Dupree. You can read about her there. I don't know who the sister is on the right. Just found the image, but as you can see here in her store, she got, you know, she got to look like she got a little bit of everything. So she has a, you know, without even knowing necessarily her religious orientation, I know one thing, that she is involved with the Voodoon. She's a Voodoon priestess. Because what are Voodoon? Plants, right? And so, you know, here's an individual, the late Dr. Kimbwadinde Kia Bonseki Fukiao, who was also, even though he was in another tradition, he was a Voodoon priest. They just call him Nganga in among the Bakongo. And one of his most important books is this book on the top right that you see that he wrote here, Self-Healing Power and Therapy, Old Teachings from Africa. And for those of you who have this book, you know and understand that he talks about, you know, medicine and an understanding of what a plant is, and the relationship of pipes being able to transmit nutrients, you know, from the earth uh, to the surface, and their role in the healing process, right? This is a very, very important book, and I recommend everyone get it. And note that, you know, I am in possession of one of his books that he did not release. It's called The Healing Plant of Yesterday. And this is Fukiao here in the center, kind of, you know, or the second to the right. And he is in Brazil. So I did an interview, well, I did a whole, you know, basically almost an online conference in dedication to Fukiao last year around this time. And, you know, we had Dr. Danny Daniel, or Danny Andrews, I think. He was telling us about his relationship with Fukiao and his travels with Fukiao. So this is one of his images that I have in the background of Fukiao in Brazil. And he is conversing with these ladies here who are, you know, medicine women, and they know all the plants and their function in this particular park area in which they govern or whatnot. So he's sharing and going back and forth with them because they're both in the same healing arts and tradition. And so, you know, he has a ton of information on Congo plants and their healing properties and the like. He's an Nganga. He's a Vodun priest, what we call a Vonduna, chief of Vodun. He's a Babalawo. He is a Siba. He's an Atiba. He's a quote unquote Sim priest in ancient Egypt, right? You know, everybody's not walking around with with tall Egyptian hats and deity mask and all of that. They just normal people. They look like this, right? And so y'all should be familiar with George Washington Carver, who lived between 1864 and 1943, who was an American scientist, botanist, educator, and inventor. Y'all should know him in terms of the creation of Tuskegee University and all of the inventions that he created. There was an article that came out some time ago called The Genius of George Washington Carver. And it talks about, his relationship to plants and how his communication and his underlying philosophy of the relationship to plants that allowed for him to make all of those different inventions and find usages, for example, the peanut. And so it goes on to say, Carver's mysticism sprang from his conviction that nature held the answers to all of life's questions, and that the only requirement for obtaining these answers was a receptive ear. Carver said, quoting now, "I love to think of nature as unlimited broadcasting station through which God, Voodoon, nature, speaks to us every day, every hour, and every moment of our lives." Carver's scientific discoveries originated from a rich inner life built upon a strong faith in divine powers. His spirituality came not from participation in a particular church, but from a deeply personal relationship to his God. Quote, "All my life," he said, quote, "I have risen regularly at 4 o'clock and have gone into the woods and talked with God." Why? Because plants are the access or the gateways to God, according to African tradition. There he gives me my orders for the day. Alone, there were things I love most. I gather specimens and study the great lessons nature is so eager to teach us all. It's continued. When people are still asleep, I hear God best and learn my plan. Carver also spoke with the subjects of his scientific inquiry. He he was always seen to have a flower in his buttonhole, and he explained that he talked with the flowers and they revealed their secrets to him. How do I talk to a little flower? Through it, I talk to the infinite. And what is the infinite? It is the silent small force. It isn't the outer physical force. Remember the definition of a woe and a vodun and an andro? It's talking about the forces beyond our experience, that is beyond the understanding of men in their handling. And so you can see here, now, although George Washington Carver was a Christian, he was an African in his mindset and in his practice. Continues. It isn't the outer physical contact. No, it isn't that. The infinite is not confined in the visible world. It is not in the earthquake, the wind, or the fire. It is the still small voice that calls up the fairies. A fellow professor and close friend, Glenn Clark, said that Carver's gift of speaking to flowers sprang from love, humility, and acceptance. His humility was maintained by avoiding what he called the I disease. In other words, ego. Carver experienced awe in his encounter with the natural world. Again, the article, I should correct myself, is George Washington Carver, Scientist and Mystic, written by Mitchell B. Lester, MD. Right? And so that ends my presentation. And I appreciate each and every one of you for listening to my rantings for the past hour and a half. And I haven't been able to pay attention to the chat, but I will look up here and see what y'all talking about. And if y'all have any questions, please put it at the bottom or any comments, and let's see what is going on. Thank you for getting that one, really appreciate it. Cabalon HVAC Services Inc. says Toronto is in the building. Peace and blessings. Thank you for joining us. Fitz1 says it's not something spooky, it's a tangible thing. It's just we don't see it working, like the social norms, Western understanding of medicine and natural in nature in general. Indeed. Nuku Amiya Bor says Vu means freedom in Ewe. All right. Somebody said Toronto, Canada. Somebody wrote in a beats in the comments. What kind of magician? Chris Angel, David Blaine, Houdini. No, that's like trolling. Exactly. Sorry, I was just about to say it. I don't even know what you were about to say or what I said when I said it, but it appears that we was on the same wavelength on something. All right. It says most medicines come from Africa because of the array of plants and animals on that one continent. The Western world just don't understand what it took to get the knowledge of what they do. Yeah, I wouldn't say that most medicines. I know a lot of medicines do come from it's not even necessarily Africans in general. It's just indigenous folks, because these people have traditions and have been on the land for a very long time. They have been studying certain plants, and what happens is, and this has been a topic of discourse for a long time, is that these large companies will come into these indigenous areas and study a people and study the plants and the applications of the medicine, or the medical application of the plants in their area. And then what they'll do is take the plants and then synthesize the spirits of it, and then go sell it and make billions of dollars on the medicines, without compensating the people from who they got the knowledge from. And so this has been a point of contention between indigenous folks, and there have been and the business conglomerates, and there has been a lot of discussion and certain people trying to work to correct that issue. And so this doesn't matter if it's on the continent of Africa, is in Asia, in North, South America. It's these indigenous groups who have grew up in these areas and have been utilizing these plants and herbs for thousands and sometimes hundreds of years. And these corporations come, study them, ask them questions, where to find it, what do they use it for? Then they come, reproduce it, and get all the monies and don't give them anything. And so it's not their original research. They're profiting off of the knowledge of these indigenous folks and not compensating them. So yes, please support the channel, and I will do that. I'll post that there. And thumb up the video and like it. And matter of fact, if y'all want to learn more about certain people and the relationships to plants and medicine in the whole art and spirituality context, I recommend the following book. Yes, that is Muntu Wan Zombie, Portrait of Human as God's Special Creation by Dr. Chilemalema Mukinge out of the Democratic Republic of Congo. He is of the Baluba people. And, you know, I don't know if y'all can see in the background, I guess you can't, but I have a few copies behind me. And so you can go to Madu Indela Press, and that's, let me see, how do I point? So, yeah, we got to get used to this camera. So, right here, you see, it's, you know, a few of those books right there. So, you can get one of those if you go to maduandelapress.com, and I will send it out immediately or almost as immediately as I can, depending on what hour it is and if the post office is open. But again, you can go to maduandelapress.com and get you a copy. So let me see what else is going on here. Says Michael Bennett asks, have I written what? Let me see. Have you written any book that details the main concepts of African religions as a collective, Kimoyo, across various cultures and peoples? If so, please mention the title. I have not, but I am working on a text on Kimoyo. So it's not going to be like an all, you know, encompassing, you know, an African religion per se, but the fundamental framework of Kimoyo. And I'm gonna give examples from all across the continent. But you know, one text that does something similar to that, that's kind of new and up to date, again, is Dr. Mukinge's text, Muntu Wan Zombie, which you can get if you go to maduandelapress.com to get you the text. So he's looking all across the continent and making those spirituality connections, you know, from west, north, south, and east. And so it's a very, very good text, and I highly recommend it. And so I will continue. Allegro says he's a psychedelic shroom. I don't even know what y'all talking about. Obviously, Rico Ming is a troll, so y'all just have to ignore him. I think these similarities of the Siren myth and the Christ story speaks to the influence of Africans and the origins of Christianity. There are parallels between Catholicism and African spirituality. Well, there's a whole bunch of things just even in the Bible in the Judaic sense with African spirituality. And that's because, you know, the interactions of Africans coming into the Middle East. That's another conversation for another day, because that's a long conversation. So I left the chat, man. I wanted to ask, when did you guys start doing front to back? The UK rappers, okay, you got another conversation. I want a chemist course. Go to Coursera.com. Coursera.com. And you know, they offer a few free, you know, courses that'll get your feet wet. And I appreciate it. Thank you. Edwin Pierre Lewis says, I was fortunate to do rites of passage with some teenage boys with him. I'm assuming you're talking about Dr. Fukiao. If so, that's a big deal. He says he is Tata. Yeah. And Plant Kingdom. I want to take chemistry, computer science, robotics, HVAC, plumbing. The list is probably. I know I'm the same way. I just love learning. I just want to do stuff. And so what I recommend is that, you know, like have a 10-year plan. And for each year, you're not learning to be an expert. you're just, taking the intro courses for the year. So, don't necessarily, you know, try to work and get a PhD in all of these. Like the first thing that I would do probably is, I don't know. Well, I know you're going to have to go computer science and then robotics first. I mean, computer science first and then robotics, because robotics builds off of the computer science fundamentals. And then, of course, the HVAC and plumbing; those are together. And then, of course, chemistry. You can know about that. Going into plumbing and the like. Um, and so you're going to learn a little bit of that. But yeah, so each year, if you're not trying to make a career out of it, but you're just wanting to learn for your own satisfaction, have a 10-year plan and just each year just learn all you can about one of those subjects and then switch to another one the next following year. And so that'll give you something uh to work towards. Let's see. African science. African brother Carver's on that Voodoo, exactly. You can do at least one, but I'm back equal the you're welcome, G Deb. Thank you for joining us. And Firelight and Tis, well, they do understand. They just don't want to give credit indeed. Even certain tree bark have medicinal properties. Exactly. Like how they've been using CTN research that's been used for thousands of years in China to further their own research here in the modern day and call their product something new. Exactly. And hello, Miss Lamb. Welcome to the party. And the geese says, sorry, I wonder if the human body and the brain can be fine-tuned like a battery to experience and see what these invisible forces, just like our modern technology. Well, certain African spiritual traditions claim to do, in terms of their rites of passage, to do just that. And of course, I haven't experienced them all, so I can't speak to it. But there are some traditions, like in the Zulu tradition, definitely in the Dagara tradition, and in certain Yoruba tradition, indeed. Uh, exactly. So Africa is the biggest continent on the planet with the largest body. So by researching the oldest studies and ancient tribal knowledge, they can't in good conscience say that there was no contribution or what was being used or healed for. Exactly. And in my text, Aluja, Volume 2, I have, like 2 chapters on science, and I cite the, a number of modern scientists talking about, for example, the ancient Egyptians and how they had a modern understanding of science and application, especially in regards to medicine. So that's something to consider. And thank you, Sister Tamika, for reminding us to big up and thumb up the video and to share it with friends. And if you want to support, that is the Cash App address there. And speaking of support, thank you, Lewis, for your super sticker and your contribution. It is greatly appreciated. And let me see here. I don't know what y'all talking about over there. Could you recommend a book or two that covers the essentials of Ifa and the Orishas? There are a number, um, but I haven't even reviewed some in a while. But I will, because it really just depends on where you're at in your studies in terms of my recommendation. Because when you're talking about Ifa is the divination system, and so you know I would have to know if you at least have your left hand in Ifa, to begin studying that aspect of the tradition. So that's going towards priesthood, if you're dealing with E5, the divination system. But orishas and the like, that's a different thing, even though they're of course interconnected. So you see that the physical eye, this he says, I have no exposure. Okay, no problem. And let me see. I know I have some in PDF form. And see, the problem is, like, I have some books in mind, but I don't have them on me. So I don't know what their full titles are, because all of my books, for the most part, are in Philadelphia. And I don't think I brought any of my E5 books with me, and I haven't bought any since I've been here. But I have some in PDF form that I could recommend, that I can send you. So if you send me an email at info@asarimhotep.com, you see the address scrolling at the bottom right here, info@asarimhotep.com, and let me know that you're looking for the E5 book recommendations. I will send you a few of the ones that I have in PDF, and then I will recommend others for you. All right. See, different says, see, Alafia and the Asarimhotep, since the Neteru is synonymous with the Orisha, are there any Egyptian texts showing you how to communicate, initiate? I don't know if there's any text specifically on how to. The Egyptians were writing in a way that they expected the reader to understand and know the culture and the unwritten aspects of what is being talked about in the text. So while there are examples of them communicating and the like, with the exceptions of funerary rituals, there's rarely any mention on how to do something. It's more so what in relationship to. Well, I guess there are some examples when it comes to certain medicines or certain procedures. So it'll talk about what to say to certain deities and the like. Some come to mind, but that there's really not, to my knowledge, there's very few texts outside of very expensive Egyptology texts that go through all of that. And so, but you can find any good one on the Book of the Dead, for example. But again, these are all funerary rituals. That's something different. But like if you get the Eber's papyrus, for example, that's a medical papyrus. You'll see some of those incantations and the like in there. But if you're dealing with African spirituality and they're calling on certain things, that's something you want to reserve for a living tradition. And so I would recommend, trying to get to know uh, a living tradition, so that the the elders in that community and that wisdom tradition can guide you through the process. Then when you go back and you're reading the ancient Egyptian literature, then you will get a better understanding and conceptual framework for dealing with the forces as articulated in the text there. So I hope that helps. Mariamine, the pineal gland. I don't know what y'all talking about. I'm dealing with folks in the pineal gland. But I think that is it for the moment. So we're going on 2 hours now. And so I do appreciate each and every one of you for joining and listening to me live. If you have any questions, any further questions, I should say, please drop it in the comment section below, and or hit me up in the email if you want something a little bit more private. And um, again, I recommend that everyone visit the maduandelapress.com, so you can get a copy of Muntuwa and Zombie, and also my latest work, Chiluba Maweja, Yoruba Orisha, and Ancient Egyptian art, an exploratory etymological study, making those connections, for example, between Orisha and Awon and the like, and where you can find Orisha in the ancient Egyptian tradition. And so again, both of those texts you can find at maduandelapress.com. And then, of course, you can also visit the link in the description section for Spreadshirt, and you can see many of the different designs. This is for the Ba and Kole. This is the name that I suggested for African Americans as an ethnic name. And here's our symbol for Kimoyo, and there's a bunch of initiatic conversations that I've had on this very program to explain to you what Kimoyo is. Let me get that off of there. And so you can find on Spreadshirt, and so you'll be seeing this shirt coming soon. Black is not a race, it's a vibe. And I have a series coming out called Ma'atematics. And so this is one of the first shirts that is going to come from that set here. So the F of X shirt is what I call it. And some of y'all have seen me wear, one version of it. So with that said, I do appreciate each and every one of you. And here is my social media addies that you can find me. So with that said, y'all continue to have a blessed week. Stay safe and stay warm for those of you in cold environments. And until next time, peace.